This breathwork series is important to me as I have struggled to breathe for most of my life. Thankfully, through breath awareness, lifestyle changes and breathing practices, I can now breathe easily. I hope that my experience can support others. This is my story. My first recorded incidence of asthma was when I was around 2 years old. It seems that it was caused by a prolonged period of emotional distress. This happened when my parents went on a holiday. From the moment they departed, I began to cry. I was inconsolable until they returned. Following this event, my mother observed how my breathing changed. From then on, I experienced asthma throughout childhood, teenage years, and much of my adult life. I was diagnosed with asthma and prescribed steroid inhalers. My father was a fisherman. I grew up in rural Ireland. I had no heater in my bedroom. The room was damp and the windows were single glazed. I had 6 brothers and sisters. None of this helped my asthma. There was little attention paid to the inflammatory effects of diet, lifestyle, environment. I was particularly affected by cold, damp weather and certain foods. These conditions could trigger an asthmatic episode. Also, I easily gained weight as I could not exercise the same as other children. All these factors together created a negative feedback loop, causing my asthma to get worse. I would use inhalers when playing sport and on cold days to release the constriction in my lungs. When experiencing an asthmatic attack, I would use powerful steroid medication that offered momentary relief. If that didn't work, I would visit the emergency room to be placed on a nebulizer which released the constriction in my airways. In my decades struggling with asthma, not a single doctor inquired into my lifestyle, diet, or exercise, nor did they educate me on any possible pharmaceutical treatments. As well as asthma symptoms, I mouth breathed as my nose was chronically obstructed with mucus. Mouth breathing caused my tonsils to have repeated bouts of infection. This resulted in having my tonsils removed when I was 16 years old. When I was 19, on the recommendation of an ENT doctor, I had a nasal septoplasty, a surgical procedure that treats obstruction in the nose caused by chronic inflammation by removing nasal tissue. This procedure yielded zero benefit. My nose was still blocked. It did nothing to change the underlying cause of the inflammation. Further, nerve damage from the operation resulted in a lazy eyelid on my left eye. I do not know what other damage and effects these operations may have had. While my asthma became more manageable in my 20s, I would still carry an inhaler, and my asthma began to significantly improve in my 30s. In transforming my asthma, there were 3 pivotal moments. The first was in 2011, when a friend returned from an Ayurvedic clinic in India where the guests were taught to use mouth tape when sleeping to promote nasal breathing. He recommended that I practice this. Since then, I have taped my mouth shut when I am sleeping almost every night. This began a process of changing my breathing from mouth to nasal breathing. The second point was talking to someone who had recently been informed by a functional medicine practitioner that she was having an inflammatory response to pulses and beans. This was a light bulb moment. I immediately understood that I suffered the same issue. As I was immersed in the yoga scene, the prevailing culture was that the healthiest diet was high in pulses, brown rice, etc. I never questioned whether this was true for me. I just assumed if I eat these foods, it will improve my health. Following this chance encounter, I eliminated these foods and transitioned to what today would be called the ketogenic diet. This changed things immediately. It decreased inflammation and mucus in my airways, which had a profound effect on my breathing. The third moment was watching a lecture by Irish breath expert Patrick McKeown. I began to understand that the problem was that I was in a chronic state of hyperventilation. This decreases the efficiency of breathing. I then understood which practices could help me correct my breathing problems. While I still carry an inhaler for emergencies, I cannot remember the last time that I needed it. My experience of breathing has obviously been much more difficult than most people's breathing, but it has driven me to understand what constitutes good breathing and which breathing practices can be helpful. While most don't have such a diagnosis as I have, it is my experience that a significant proportion of my students can improve how they breathe through breath awareness, lifestyle changes, and breathing practices. It is also important to understand that while these changes worked for me, a different person may require a different approach. However, most of us have room to improve our respiratory capacity, and in so doing, we can experience a sense of calm and well-being that cannot be experienced otherwise, for we breathe thousands of times each day. How we breathe is simply foundational to our sense of well-being. In the past, in describing my lungs, the picture I painted was of damaged, scarred tissue. Today, the picture in my mind is of healthy lungs that need a little care. I look forward to joining you on this journey to discover which practices work for you.